I'm Dave Sampson, and welcome back to ThriveTV. Just over 2 weeks ago, Hafnium attackers began exploiting Microsoft Exchange Server. The attacks associated with this specific breach are easily exceeding what has been seen in the SolarWinds attack. This week, Thrive's EVP of FinTech, Mark Capobianco, joins us to discuss the latest. Mark, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Can you give our viewers a little background on the Hafnium exploit and what's been happening over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, certainly. Appreciate being here. So yeah, I think when we look at what's happened with this Exchange kind of exploit, Microsoft initially announced back about 2 weeks ago that there was a very specific threat actor group targeting Microsoft Exchange servers, and that those attacks were very kind of isolated from a particular threat actor group. Microsoft released a patch for their server on Tuesday, March 2nd. The patch was to address 4 specific CVEs, or common vulnerability exploits. What we quickly saw, Dave, from that week was it wasn't just a very targeted attack. Within about a couple of days, that what was a 0-day attack very quickly ramped up to seeing, as many as 5 threat actor groups kind of actively exploiting this in the wild. So we saw what a very targeted attack went to folks kind of weaponizing this at an unprecedented rate that, like, frankly, we've never seen this type of rate before. So as of the last week or so, we're now seeing reports as many as 10 different threat actor groups are now targeting Microsoft Exchange servers and actively going after trying to exploit these 4 particular common vulnerability exploits. Interesting.
So it sounds like this attack is really exceeding the exploits that have occurred with the SolarWinds event. This sounds like a bigger scenario. And one of the things that I found really interesting is that I would have never predicted that this many organizations are actively running Microsoft Exchange Server on premise at this point. That's one of the surprising pieces for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's still quite a bit of folks who, still have that on-premise Exchange Server. I think when we look at it, and particularly as we look at SolarWinds, SolarWinds, the numbers were around like 18,000 servers, customers impacted. When you saw some of the numbers coming out in the news, and I think this is what was fascinating to me, is it went from 20,000 servers, 30,000 servers on that Friday night, about 3 days after Microsoft released the patch, to the Wall Street Journal reporting as many as 250,000 servers. So you're now seeing a whole bunch of threat actor groups, really leveraging a lot of the botnets, trying to basically spray the internet and probe these servers and drop what is called a web shell on that server.
So this is like that classic exploit scenario, right? Exploits identified, robots have been created to go out and take advantage of that, and now it's just out there banging on doors looking for opportunities.
Yeah, I think what's kind of fascinating here too is, the reports were dating back as early as January, February, and some you'll see even as early as the end of 2020, in a very kind of stealth manner. What recent news has kind of shown is that those threat actor groups kind of got wind that Microsoft was going to patch a week early. And I think that's when we started to see, really a whole bunch of other adversaries kind of hopping on that and, kind of spraying, again, dropping those web shells. Really, at that point, it was a matter of...
Before that window of opportunity closed, they knew the window was closing, they turned up the heat.
Exactly, right? Like, so if you can kind of, get that foothold, kind of establish the beachfront on that environment and then come back. So now that I've dropped the presence of that web shell, it allows me to now come back and start to do everything from, data exfiltration, malware, start to simulate like man-in-the-middle attacks that then lead to business email compromises or things like that. So there's some of the kind of common things that we're starting to see. I'd say of recent now in the last few days, what went from data exfiltration and other malicious activity is now, launching into specific trends of ransomware. So it's getting this wrong, not WannaCry, but DearCry is the new kind of ransomware threat now for this specific issue.
So the common threat variables are starting to merge together here. We have an active exploit, and they're just turning up the heat on the cyber ransomware attacks, which we're seeing on a regular basis anyway. But this just sounds like the perfect opportunity to open the door and get into a ransomware event. If I have Exchange running in my environment, how do I know if I've been exploited? How do I know if I'm vulnerable or protected, or the current state there?
Yeah, great questions all around. So I think, first, Microsoft has released a detection tool. So that's kind of the first step that we would be recommending to clients is go out, run that tool from Microsoft, and that will at least be able to tell you if there's any presence of the Microsoft exploit in your environment. Second, I would recommend is CISA has some great information. We're going to attach the link at the bottom here. So take a look at that link. And it has a very prescriptive kind of step-by-step things that you should be doing if you have Exchange in your environment. So that'd be another great thing. And then third, kind of coming back to just good cyber hygiene, good best practices here, Dave, would be, back to that defense in depth cybersecurity framework. So, things that we've deployed to kind of mitigate against this attack vector specifically are things like advanced endpoint detection and response software, having a SIM SOC software. So things that can actually specifically identify these threats, artifacts of this particular, these 4 specific CVEs, be able to detect those and immediately block any of those malicious connections back to any type of command and control, site like that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the components you're talking about really tie directly back to having a robust organizational security program, making sure that there's a formally adopted security framework, and plugging in those risk mitigation strategies and solutions to protect the organization. It's actually something that we talk about regularly in client discussions as well as on this program. So if you don't have a formal security program in place, if you haven't adopted a security framework and you've been taken really specific measures to mitigate risk in the organization, you're really leaving yourself in a vulnerable place because you probably haven't covered all the areas comprehensively that need to be addressed to maintain security posture for your organization. One of the things we see very often with customers is that they've gone out and they've effectively cherry-picked solutions that appear to be very good at mitigating organizational risk, but they've also left holes because they've kind of taken into the sexiness of a specific solution, but that solution's only covering a certain amount of the security gap, risk gap, and they need to plug in all the solutions. And that's where having that full picture security program tied directly to a security framework really delivers value and really allows the organizations to build and maintain a robust security posture.
Yeah, and I think it's a phenomenal point, Dave. And I think one of the things that I kind of key in on that you just said is around risk. So when we think about risk, many of these organizations, particularly if they're regulated entities, have some sort of incident response plan. So let me kind of flip the question back to you here for a sec. When you see folks like that who do have an incident response plan, what are some of the actions that they should be taking with their incident response plan if they have something in place today?
Yeah. So having an incident response plan is certainly a key part of every security program, and regularly reviewing that plan, making sure that you're actually exercising the plan at least annually. So we want to have these plans, but we also want to test them to make sure that they're meeting the needs of the organization. But when an event like this occurs, investigating this event, fully documenting it end to end, because ensuring that you're following the steps you've already defined, outlining the plan, what occurred, what actions have been taken specifically, defining data sets that may have been impacted, and then taking additional measures, especially as it might apply to any personal information, financial information, healthcare information, all these different sensitive data segments. That's going to come back down the road. So when some type of regulatory event occurs, an audit event, that's when that documentation is going to be mission critical. But it's also very critical to protecting the folks that it may impact, whether that's business entities or individuals.
Yeah, so I guess kind of when you talk about reviewing that and, kind of thinking about the cadence for those reviews, but like who's also the right person? So when you think about an organization, like who's the right individual in the organization to be doing that? And if a firm doesn't have that, like what are some of your recommendations there?
Yeah, so a lot of the times, some organizations are at a size where they have a chief compliance officer or a director of compliance or somebody that's really overseeing these plans and operating these plans, reviewing these plans on a regular basis. But other folks, they might just have a CFO or a COO who's really kind of been appointed the responsibility because somebody needs to do it. And those folks, they really need a little bit of extra support, a little bit of extra expertise inside the firm to make sure they are doing the right things. And we're seeing incredible ramp right now in the VCSO product offering, basically a fractional CISO who can come in, understand the business needs, look at a security program and adopted framework as they may exist. But if they don't exist, help that organization identify the right security program and establish and attach a formal security framework and start building their risk mitigation strategy. Because it's an event it's not a one-time event. It needs to happen on an ongoing basis. And that's why we see, something like a VCSO, there's really monthly engagement with the client. What is our current security posture? Are we doing what we say that we're doing? How are we validating that back to the organizational management and providing executive levels of reporting up the chain so that, as the board, the CEO, how do they understand where organizational security posture is? These are folks that are reading headlines every day regarding cybersecurity breaches, but they don't totally understand what their current state of cybersecurity is. And that's where that validation and reporting component comes in. So, something that we use often with customers, like our ransomware threat variable scorecard, being able to display a scorecard to a customer that says, okay, this is where you rate in top areas of risk, and this is what your mitigation strategies are. It gives them the right level of comfort knowing that they're taking the right actions to protect their organization, protect their employees, and protect their customers.
Yeah, all great points. Awesome points.
Well, Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. Always great to see you.
You as well, Dave. Take care.
Thanks again, Mark, for joining us this week. Remember to follow best practices to maintain strong security posture and protect your organization from risks associated with this latest breach, as well as other vulnerabilities. Review your organization's security program and incident response program regularly, and validate those plans at least annually. For the latest on Hafnium and other cybersecurity news this week, please check the description box below. For ThriveTV, I'm Dave Sampson. Have a great weekend. And until next time, who's accessing your data?